What's the most disturbing secret you've discovered about someone close to you? Here are some of the top picks. Please watch till the end and leave a comment. Enjoy!
In the final 24 hours before my dad passed away from stage 4 lung cancer, he was admitted to the ER and then moved to the ICU. Due to strict hospital COVID restrictions, we couldn't be by his side. My mother, sister, and I tried desperately to reach him all day through texts and calls, but we never heard back. My mother even contacted the hospital and spoke with an ICU nurse, who reassured her that he was awake and communicating well. However, he passed away suddenly at 3:30 a.m. the following morning. By the time we were allowed to be at his bedside, he was unconscious. We said our goodbyes, and he was gone. That morning, while my mom was still asleep, I was making arrangements with the cremation services and going through his belongings that the hospital had returned. Among them was his phone. I wanted to read through our last messages to find some comfort, but what I discovered was shocking. When I opened his phone, I saw that none of our texts, mine, my mom's, or my sister's, had been read. It struck me as unusual, but I thought he might have been too weak to respond. As I explored his apps, I came across a chat app one vaguely recognized, similar to WhatsApp. I opened the app and saw a single contact with a female name. As I read through the messages, I realized that my dad had been in constant contact with this girl for the past 24 hours and beyond. He was calling her princess and expressing his love, while she was asking about his condition and expressing her fears. It was clear that he was involved in an emotional affair. My grief quickly turned to a mix of hurt and anger. A week later, I found and contacted the girl through DMs. She was 19 years old, having been 17 when they first met. She revealed that he was her high school bus driver and that they had been dating for almost 2 years. My dad was 66 years old when he died, and he chose to spend his final moments with someone much younger than his own grandchildren. While I hope it brought him some happiness, it's a painful secret that will forever cast a shadow over my memories of him. It's a truth I wish I had never discovered, and one that will haunt me for the rest of my life. Next story kinda sounds like a plot of a movie. Anyways. She was my best friend of 7 years, we had literally been through it all together. I moved out of state with my now husband, but she convinced us both to move back to be closer with her, after about a year. We had no real ties to the state we had tried out, so we said screw it, let's go back, she's basically family. We were all so happy to be reunited, she was over almost every night for dinner, we all laughed and talked and had a blast. Best year of my life. Then slowly, she started trying to turn my husband and I against each other. Anytime we had an argument, like any couple does, she would text each of us about how right we were, trying to foster animosity between the two of us. With me, she started talking about how she had a plan before us, that if my husband and I couldn't make it work, I could move in with her and we'd live happy lives together. With my husband, she started talking about her infertility issues and how she wanted to have a kid just like him, she just needed a sperm donor. This all happened at around the same time, and my husband and I compared texts and figured it out. She wanted to take his sperm and have a baby with me. When confronted about it, she refused to admit anything and started lashing out at both of us. It got to the point where she would show up unannounced, banging on the door, demanding a place in our home. It was so terrifying and panic-inducing that we ended up having to move and change our phone numbers. I guess it's so disturbing because I had never had a friend like her, only to find out that she cared about me, but in such an unhealthy and scary way. But yeah, that's my story.
This next story makes me sick. A former friend of mine from childhood was a youth pastor at a summer church camp. Turns out he was grooming young girls and teens both at camp and online after camp was over. Only reason I found out was back in 2011, he was in his late 20s at the time. One of the girls told her parents and the cops posed as her online while he masturbated into a webcam. The cop then convinced him to drive 3 hours to go meet and hook up. When he showed up at the girl's place in the middle of the night, the cops were waiting and arrested him. He's now a convicted sex offender and did time in jail. The crazy part? Once he got out, he moved to Texas and married a divorcee that had kids. He's also now the dean of online studies at his church and is responsible for growing the number of students taking classes online. That is horrifying. Well, moving on. Warning. This next one is even more disturbing. I found out when I was an adult that my mother didn't just abandon me one day after work like I had been led to believe. Turns out she had been gang raped. She said they took her wallet and made a disgusting comment about my picture inside. I would have been a toddler at this time, and she was just too scared to go home. She said they followed her. She said when it was over and my stepdad took her to the hospital, they had to stitch everything back together down there. She spent that time away on and off the psych ward. My mom and me still have a rocky relationship for reasons beyond this, but I definitely understand her better. She's had issues with drinking and her mental health all my life, and I really think it's because she's never sought proper help for what happened to her. Underneath all that trauma, drinking, and grief, is my mother. And she's one of the most beautiful souls that'll ever walk this earth. For clarification, she stayed in my life, just my grandparents raised me. There was a lot of other drama as well, but none of it worth getting into. Here's another crazy one. One night as a kid I heard my parents having an explosive argument in their bedroom which suddenly went quiet. The door was closed and locked. I found out during a drunk phone call from my mother it was because she attempted to shoot my father in the face with a .303, but it didn't go off when she pulled the trigger as there were no bullets. They were both horrified and just stared at each other apparently. They're still together. Next story, my brother was stealing money from father who had dementia. This went on for a year, and then I found out about it was because the bank who had my father's mortgage called me wondering why it hadn't been paid in 6 months. My father's bank account went into the negative around this time too, and when I confronted my brother about it he said, "Well, I gotta pay my bills." I was about to take control of all the accounts and make sure shit got back on track, but my father ended up in the hospital and died shortly after that. My brother also stole some of my inheritance too. In the end, he stole over $5,000 from his dying father. Jesus. Let's just go to the next one. Discovered that my sister stole my father's $25,000 Rolex not more than 24 hours after he died. I only discovered it when her and her husband made a frivolous purchase, and I wondered where they got their money since they were always broke and begging my parents for money. I got suspicious. It hit me that she might have stolen and sold the Rolex. Had the paperwork, ran a track on the sales history and discovered it had been sold to a pawn shop down the street from where my sister lives. Went to the pawn shop and after a bit of persuasion got them to tell me who sold it to them, and it was my sister. Me and my mom disowned her.
Here's a favorite one of mine. My mom received birthday cards with money in them for years from her parents. She kept the cards with the money in them, saving to buy a piano for sentimental reasons. My sister, who has repeatedly stolen from family members, found the collection of cards/money and took them. My mom only wanted the cards back when she realized what happened. My sister denied everything. Fuck you, Emily.
Anyways, I hope you enjoyed. Please tell me in the comments which one was your favorite. Thanks for watching.